Hi, everyone. My name is Raagini Lalwani, and I lead public cloud onboarding and migration at Goldman Sachs. Let me start by wishing everybody happy Women's Day and happy Holi for those of you who are celebrating. A little bit about me. I've worked at Goldman Sachs for almost 15 years, and I've started my journey as an intern and then grown through my tenure over there. In my growth journey, I've dealt with various kinds of cloud platforms, the private cloud, the hybrid cloud, and most recently, of course, the public cloud. So today, we're going to be talking about how Goldman Sachs is approaching the problem of ensuring our developers are able to rapidly and securely use the cloud in a highly regulated industry. With that, I'll pass on to Aditya, my co-presenter.
Thanks, Raagini. Hi, everyone. I'm Aditya Kurella. Very excited to be presenting here with Raagini. I lead the finance planning engineering teams at Goldman Sachs. In addition, I'm also the lead architect for FP&A. Similar to Raagini, I've spent close to 15 years with the firm. Started with basic web app development, and now I look at enterprise systems, pretty complex architectures. We are at a very unique phase in our journey where we are now looking at cloud and onboarding in cloud, how on-prem translates to cloud. So I'll be talking a lot about our onboarding experience with public cloud, using some of the secure tooling that Raagini's team has built, how have we accelerated our cloud onboarding, and some of our key highlights and learning along the way. So that is where I'll spend time. So Raagini, back to you.
Great, thanks, Aditya. So before we get into what we're covering here as part of FastTrack, let's talk a little bit about Goldman Sachs. It's a well-recognized name in the financial services industry and in households, but what does Goldman Sachs actually do, right? The Goldman Sachs Group is, of course, a leading financial institution, and it delivers a broad range of services across financial services, so investment banking, securities, investment management, and consumer banking. And this is to a very large and diversified client base that includes corporations, financial institutions, governments, and individuals. Goldman has been around for a long time. We were founded in 1869, and the firm is headquartered in New York and maintains offices pretty much across the globe around major financial centers and around. But Goldman can mean so many different things to different people, especially in today's world where information is literally available at fingertips, right? In the form of digital properties and so on. With that, let's dive right into how Goldman is looking to accelerate our cloud journey while keeping a security-first mindset. So let's talk a little bit about FastTrack. In this section, we learn a little bit about the problem statement, the design considerations that we've come up with, and most importantly, the solution with a deep dive into the technical implementation. So we want to probably start with Amazon's terminology of working backwards, right? We're keeping a customer-centric mindset. We use the working backwards process to understand the problem statement from the customer. Here, in this case, our customer is an application developer. So let's start with an application developer. Now, application developer is trying to meet deadlines, deploy an app to the cloud. New person joined the firm, doesn't know anything about how the firm operates, how the firm looks at their cloud security, etc. So first, he needs to understand, or she needs to understand, how does this firm approach security? What is its security posture? How do they manage it? What are the modules they use for it? Etc., etc. So that's the first hurdle an application developer needs to solve for when they are joining a firm in the financial services industry. Once they do that, then, okay, I've learned how to figure this out. Now I want to try to deploy something. Then they realize that everything that needs to get deployed needs to go through security reviews. Now, security reviews can be manual and time consuming, right? So as they are trying to deploy, they understand that this is going to be an iterative process. It may be a slow process because the security reviews are not just required at the time of the first deploy, but also when any subsequent changes are made. This can be a hugely frustrating experience as a developer. Now, the third thing that happens is, okay, they have figured out the libraries, they've understood the firm's posture, they have also managed to, skip through the security reviews, move ahead, and then they've deployed something and they are like, all right, success, I've deployed to the cloud. Then they realize that, hey, I've received an alert right now My alert is telling me that I've deployed something that is not correct. Detective controls have come up. So detective controls, again, from this application developer's perspective, are too late in the game. They need to have been told before, and their first reaction is that, why couldn't you just tell me in the first place, right? Why did you let me get ahead with an incorrect configuration? I'm new to the cloud, I'm new to the firm, I didn't understand this is going to be the impact of something I'm going to do. And as an application developer, this person is very good at application development, but may not be a cloud security engineer. So that was the dichotomy out here, that you need to, if you are trying to learn to develop and deploy in the cloud, you are also required to have first a long amount of lead time, understand how this firm works, and also become somewhat of a cloud security expert. So employees feel stuck. They want to use the cloud for its benefits, but the risk and the security teams are very concerned. Keeping these points in mind, with this problem statement, we came up with some tenets in mind about how we want to address these problem statements. So first point that we thought about, won't it be great if we have the right kind of guardrails to ensure that you cannot build something that'll be insecure? Rather, it is secure by design. So we wanted to automate the security baseline. You cannot deploy to the cloud if you are not meeting that baseline. The next thing we thought about is having a very clearly defined shared responsibility model. What is the responsibility of the cloud service provider? What is the responsibility of the Goldman Sachs cloud teams, in this case, my team, which is the cloud enablement team? And what is the responsibility of an application developer or a user like Aditya in this case? So with that, we wanted to come up with a solution that is secure by design and adheres to a clear shared responsibility model. The third thing we thought about from our user feedback was that having to understand how does this firm approach cloud security, what is the tool chain they use, etc., is quite tedious. We wanted to stay close to cloud native technologies. We wanted to make sure that they don't have to learn much new firm specific tooling, but rather if they have learned how to use AWS CDK or KCC, then they can just move forward with that knowledge and build on top of that. Keeping all of these 3 points in mind for the developer, we wanted to have something for us as well. So we thought, won't it be amazing if we have all these great features, but they can be used self-service? That will help our team, which is a cloud enablement team, ensure that more developers can get to the cloud without any hurdles or without having to raise tickets or call others to review, manage your workloads, etc. We wanted to create as much self-service and automation as possible. With all this, enter FastTrack as our response to it. So let's go a little deeper into what did we do and how did we solve for these problems. So this is going to be a slightly technical deep slide. Hang on with me and I'll recap this another time after this as well. So what is FastTrack, right? The actual definition. So here's what I've learned for this. So Cloud FastTrack is a fully managed service that enables Goldman Sachs developers to develop and deploy software to AWS rapidly by proactively and programmatically enforcing the firm's security, regulatory, and compliance requirements as applicable to the cloud infrastructure via guardrails. This greatly enhances our security posture. And if you didn't understand any of that, it's fine. I'm going to break this down for you. So what does that actually mean? The first thing I said is FastTrack is a fully managed service. By this, I mean that FastTrack will handle a lot of things for you behind the scenes. Things like account creation and pipeline management of your deployment. Now, pipeline is just a fancy name for your application deployment workflow. Out here is a user can interact with the FastTrack CLI or API to create a pipeline, delete a pipeline, share a pipeline. Now, when they create a pipeline, it kicks off an account provisioning workflow. Behind the scenes, it can talk to org management and it creates 2 accounts, a service account for your AWS resources, that's where your resources get deployed, and a pipeline account to manage those resources. So I'm looking at those 2 clouds at the bottom of the screen. Once this is done, a user is able to push their code changes. Now, this can be their application infrastructure requirements, like the compute they need, the databases they need, etc. And this runs a deployment pipeline and hits a guardrail module. The guardrails is where the real USP of FastTrack is. This is where the programmatic and proactive enforcement of the firm's security posture happens. Now, say, for example, you're trying to create a storage node and an AWS that's called an S3 bucket. By default, every S3 bucket will be unencrypted or open for access, which, of course, as a security risk team, that will be quite a nightmare. So in our baseline security policy, also known as guardrails, we have defined that every S3 bucket must have encryption. Every S3 bucket must block public access. And only if these guardrails are met, then you can go ahead and deploy your resources. Otherwise, your pipeline will fail. So let's dig a little bit deeper into this, and hopefully that will make things a little clearer. So going back to the problem statement and we were trying to solve and looking at it from the user's perspective, just a simplified user journey, right? The user creates a FastTrack pipeline, associates it with a GitLab repo, writes their infrastructure as code. This can be using AWS CDK, which is their native cloud development kit. Our pipeline, this was the automated deployment workflow, takes the CDK code, synthesizes it into CloudFormation templates. Now, CloudFormation is the templating language. So from here, the user's code is synthesized into well-defined templates, and the guardrails that we discussed run against these templates. And the policy engine gives us pretty much an output of go or no go. That's essentially FastTrack in a nutshell. That's what's actually happening, and making sure that users are able to develop quickly into the cloud, but within the security bubble that we want them to stay in. So just a little bit about guardrails out here. Guardrails are following a default deny policy, and we use OPA, Rego, to write these guardrails. And then these are, of course, run against standard CloudFormation templates that I just talked about. With that, I'm going to move forward a little bit into guardrail development. So here, on the right-hand side, we're going through the steps of how you actually go and create a guardrail, and then we'll talk a little more about the left hand. So let's start with an example guardrail. Let's go with malicious actor can access object which is unencrypted. So let's stick with our S3 example, right? So I said malicious actor can access object which is unencrypted, but wait a minute, how did we come up with this threat, right? We're not sitting around a table and like, hey, you come up with a threat, you come up with a threat. What we're doing is we're using a guideline around what our threat models should be. In this case, we're using NIST 853, that's the National Institutes of Standard and Technology. They publish a security guideline, and we're using the NIST 853 guideline to come up with what are all the threats for a specific piece of technology. In this case, we're talking about a security or storage object and how it can be accessed. So back to our threat. Malicious actor can access an object that is unencrypted. Now that's the first step out here, you see, which is the threat detection. And then we want to come up with a control definition. One threat can be mitigated by one or more controls. For the sake of our example, let's stick with one control. So malicious actor can access object that is unencrypted. The control that we come up with is let's encrypt this object. That should be easy enough. So then what we do is we have our control definition review by our security team. These controls are defined in Rego and eventually used as an OPA policy. And then this implementation, is further reviewed and unit tests are reviewed. So there are a bunch of further reviews done by our security team. So this is kind of a collaboration between our cloud enablement guardrail development team and the security teams that we have at Goldman. And then we release these controls and we have a guardrail. So now we are at the second last step, which is releasing the controls. Now, the fun thing about guardrails is that while our security team loves them and they create a secure environment, it is also a hurdle for a developer. So say if you have 10 guardrails blocking you, then you're going to spend hours trying to solve each one. And that's not the best developer experience. So what we have done is also built accelerators. These are essentially constructs that we build so that these work with the guardrails. And you can say, for example, if you use a FastTrack S3 bucket, it already works with all of the 10 guardrails that block S3. So you can plug and play and deploy them very quickly into the public cloud. Another piece out here that I want to call out is as part of the cloud onboarding space that we have, we also provide a lot of sample code and starter projects to help our user base bootstrap their cloud journey. So on the left-hand side, this is what a sample guardrail looks like. And you can see the thread definition, the mapping to the NIST control, and some of the properties and the CloudFormation template. Now, with that, FastTrack has now been launched and is available, and we have several applications in production and many more underway. So now I'm going to hand over to Aditya, who's going to talk to us about his first application and our first, as a firm, our first application on FastTrack. So with that,
hey, Raagini, a question for you, if you can hear me.
absolutely, yes. I can hear you, and we'll maybe this is a moment to pause before we get into the customer journey. Yes.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to enter or unmute yourself.
Yeah. So Raagini, question for you is, there are lots of services in the AWS space, right? Hundreds of them. Did you have to do any organizational, like who built these products, right? Like if I think of a product, like S3 bucket as a product, who built these products? And of course, there's databases and other things where a DBA level of insight is needed to build a database product. I'd love to hear more about the organizational alignment in your journey in terms of enablement and how you built, sort of codified the standards. I think, you're clear, you use CloudFormation and you codified things for developers to consume, right, via CDK. But I'd love to hear who did what and what was your organizational model looks like. Because a typical enterprise organization is very siloed model. Everybody does one thing, and they're very good at that one thing, but it's a very silo-based model. So can you elaborate on that?
Sure, I can talk about that very quickly, but I will say the first thing is, you're right, most enterprises, large enterprises are siloed. One of the key things out here was that we as a firm decided that we wanted to invest in a first-class developer experience and not reduce our security posture. So we needed to make sure that we had a solution that solves for that for our customer base. And if we are doing that, we need to come up with a larger mandate from our management, right? That the teams will, of course, partner together on this. But just for the organizational piece, so of course, FastTrack was deemed as a flagship project that that teams rally around. Cloud enablement led the development, but it was very, very hand in hand with our technology risk teams to ensure that we are partnering with them. And the guardrail development specifically is very much in line. And like I went through the steps one by one, and I can just pull up that slide, just keeping it handy before that. So just on the other piece about, everyone in cloud enablement may not be an expert on S3 or databases and so on. Yes, we do have that constraint, of course. We do have some expectations that the people who are doing the actual guardrail development are, a mix of good developers, cloud architects, and security engineers. We do need that mix. They should understand ballpark about, what are the various security threats that we need to mitigate for. But at the same time, we have a guardrail contribution model, which means that we also ensure that, hey, if it is a storage related piece, then we have the storage engineering team review these as well. If it's a database product, then a database, the middleware engineering team contributes as well. So we do have a contribution model, and there is some organizational efforts made around that these teams are prioritizing their input into this as well. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah. So is a database team not owner of a database product in the cloud?
No. So the way it works is that the database team, so the application team is the owner of all their cloud resources. Now they will be deploying the what they need for their compute, whether it's ECS or Lambda or something, or what their databases are. And when Aditya goes through his example, maybe that'll be a little more clearer. But whatever they deploy gets deployed into their VPC, and that's they own those pieces. The database team is more responsible for working with cloud enablement and coming up with the right set of controls around this, along with access control and those kind of things. So policy management and kind of audit related pieces. So that's what the database team is responsible for. You are absolutely right. On-prem, the database team owns the databases and the customers use those databases. But in the cloud, it's a slightly different model where they are, of course, running in AWS and the customer owns them. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to pick more brains offline. Thank you.
Actually, Murray, just to add to even Raagini, right? The way I would probably summarize is there is a central cloud team which Raagini and team runs. That is the authority around cloud development, establishing these guardrails framework. The CIO, CTO, and the tech risk office is basically helping sponsor some of new guardrail development and some of policies around cloud onboarding, cloud governance. And the associated teams that are the DB teams, your IAM teams, your every other integration point, they're working with, I think, Raagini's team to get some of their services and policies onboarded. As an app development team, we work with Raagini's team to basically now implement our apps using FastTrack. We've also given some requests around the services that we want. Like when FastTrack launched, there were limited general available services which had fully guardrail, tech risk approved guardrails. And as we've now gone through, we have asked for certain additional services and they have worked with the related teams to get them on. So it's a very collaborative model. Multiple teams are playing their part. So I hope that kind of answers your
And I do want to say one more thing. Of course, Aditya was our first application on FastTrack, so it was a little more hands-on because we needed to, we ourselves were learning what the customer journey actually manifests like. But at the same time, as we are moving forward, the intention is the guardrails exist, right? And then customers are able to use this on their own. So we are trying to make sure that we invest in tutorials. I do have a few other folks from our teams joined in as well. Is there anyone else who wanted to add anything here?
Yeah, I wanted to just add a little bit more color here. Is that like we as a platform team aren't necessarily saying to our customers who are the engineers at Goldman to say like, we will build everything for you in terms of the resources, but you're free to build an application, a pattern with the resources that you need, but we will help build the security controls for them. For example, if we take Lambda as an example, we have built guardrails as a team to say like what are the security controls that need to be implemented, and of course accelerators to make it easier for the developers. So you're now free to use Lambda if that's one of the services that would be needed. Could be Dynamo, RDS. There's just some examples. So we're not prescribing to them these are the only things or this is the only way you need to do, but we do give guidance and we do build the guardrails to safely deploy these resources. Hope that adds.
Yeah, no, this is good. I think this is very, very useful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit about how do you use guardrails when you're developing versus production deployments? Is it the same guardrails that are applied, or how does that pipeline work when
I can answer that. Yeah. So our guardrails are the same, whether so we have a sandbox environment, and then you would deploy in your non-prod, and then you deploy your prod deployment, right? Our guardrails are all the same, and the guardrails are all in blocking mode in all of these deployment environments. One key piece to keep in mind is if we were to have them non-blocking somewhere, then it would, of course, these are all connected to our internal network, and we can't have a drop in our security posture. However, if somebody needs a specific guardrail bypassed for a specific use case, say for example, they're deploying this S3 bucket going back to my piece, and they need, by default we block public access, but their use case needs that. We are able to control those bypasses on a per pipeline level, so we're able to manage it very, very fine-grained if that is needed. And of course, that needs to go through a tech risk review because we're deviating from the security posture. So we do have that, overall, to answer your question, they are the same guardrails and they are on all the environments.
Right. And the guardrail, is it like an API that the pipeline checks, or can you talk a little bit about how technically it happens in your environment?
There are It is an API that the pipeline checks, but it is also, and we've also made it available as an IDE plugin so that developers can get feedback sooner and they don't have to actually deploy the pipeline. So as they're developing in their IDE, they should be able to see get the feedback of what this actually looks like.
All right, thank you for sharing. Thank you.
All right, any other
quick
questions?
question on the NIST implementation. You said you use NIST for standards, and NIST and ISO and IEEE provide standards, but do you actually plug into an active threat database or something that is beyond just a standard, like something that can keep you up to date on things as they change?
There are two pieces here. When we started the project, we were like, we need to start somewhere. So we were looking at, let's start with the NIST 853. But beyond that, all these active threads, etc., we have our own cyber defense and intel team. So they keep us informed as new threats come in. And if we need to, based on the kind of the vulnerability level, if it's critical or not, we decide how we want to manage that into our SDLC.
Okay, all right. So you plug into your own internal threat
If I may
database.
add,
Gotcha.
If I may add, the detective controls also do exist, of course, as a firm, in managing our cloud resources. But what we're talking about here is, providing through this guardrails, preventative controls, so we don't get into a situation which we shouldn't be. But of course, detective controls are necessary as well. They complement these that we have in the pipeline stage.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, just in the interest of time, let's have Aditya cover his pieces and then we can take a few more questions. So Aditya, I'll stop on this slide for you.
Yeah, thanks, Raagini. So before we jump into cloud and FastTrack, which is, I think, providing a very differentiated solution for us in the firm, I want to quickly introduce FP&A, Finance Planning and Analysis. So as Finance Planning Analysis, we are responsible for firm-wide business planning, cost allocations, and driving financial insights within the firm. So we are very aggressively pursuing a cloud-first strategy where we want 100% of our on-prem and also all our new applications to be moved to cloud by the end of 2024. So why cloud now, right? And Raagini, if you can move to the next slide. Why FP&A and why cloud now is in FP&A, and as it happens with a lot of the finance teams, we run a lot of our processes on a monthly cycle. So we see a lot of compute usage, which has huge peaks and troughs depending on the time of the month. There are limitations on current on-prem solutions, and some of the solutions also take up a lot of engineering time to maintain. We are lucky in FP&A that we have less legacy. We took a very aggressive strategy about 3 years back where we decomped a lot of our on-prem legacy infrastructure. We are probably 70% about there. And any new things that we build in the last 3 years, we build with an eye for cloud. So we build microservice friendly architecture, cloud-ready architecture. So whenever we had a more robust and secure tooling around cloud, we would be ready to onboard. Right. We were also very heavily invested in IAC, even on-prem. I believe it's a discipline that you need for cloud. So we were already there. So overall, we felt for FP&A, when paired with good design, cloud offers actually a low cost of compute, increased productivity with very reduced build and maintenance cycles, right? And lastly, which is, I think, the icing on the cake, when we were very actively considering public cloud, FastTrack became available. Right, so the platform also, as Raagini said, has huge sponsorship from engineering leaders. This is the strategic platform for the firm. As you see in the roadmap, we started building our first app in June. There was an app called FPA Central. It's a pretty simple gateway application. It was a collection of all of our apps in one place so that our users can easily discover, search, request entitlements, see usage stats, etc. So fairly low risk profile. We took this as the first app so that we can learn AWS, we can learn FastTrack, we can form opinions. And then we had a very something that we could deploy fast. So we took about 3 to 4 months for development, and about September end and October we went live with the MVP for FPA Central, right? This was a representative microservice app having a set of Spring Boot APIs with deployed using ECS Fargate and DynamoDB, including a lightweight React.js based UI. What we did with this foundational architecture was we fully containerized the architecture. We're able to understand all the SDLC and go live mechanisms. And then finally, we're able to even deploy in prod. We started our second and third app somewhere around late September and October. Now the complexity in these apps increased. Like we kind of built 4+ microservices each for these second and third applications. We established on-prem connectivity with another product called Skypath, which enabled us a secure way to access on-prem APIs. We deployed a workflow solution. We also deployed our first app in a dedicated FP&A specific VPC, which was a first also for us in the firm, right? So what you see here in the timeline is though our application complexity increased, we actually built many more microservices, used more tooling and services. FastTrack actually enabled us to be more productive, right? Our delivery times as we built the next app decreased over time. Also, the teams became more skilled, so which also helped in decreasing overall, like build timelines. So to summarize, right? So we deployed 3 cloud-native apps, 8+ services in prod. We learned how to build software, undergo cloud onboarding, tech risk reviews, all the architecture bar raising processes, SDLC, and then we are able to train about half of FP&A engineers. Now, going into next year, right, our key focus will be around high usage app, right, and data intensive calc engines, right? We process about 6 billion records every single day when we're trying to close the financial month. So we're going to focus a lot of 2023 in building these apps. From a tech perspective, what this means is we'll look at a lot of serverless offerings like Lambda and step functions. We'll look at data processing and analytics services such as Glue, Athena, S3, Snowflake. And through our journey, we also realized that we can have opinionated CDK constructs. FastTrack already uses Raagini made a plug around FastTrack accelerators. We want to go one step ahead, where we want to build FP&A centric accelerators so that, across all our Scrum teams, all our architectures, we use a very standardized set of CDK constructs, further accelerating FP&A development, right? So this is our overall roadmap. We feel very bullish about what we have done. I think FastTrack has enabled us. So going back to our first cloud experience, right? So Raagini, if you could jump to the next slide. So we wanted to share this playbook with the audience here on what made this happen. Hopefully you can leverage this in your own organization. Some of the steps should be very similar, or at least they should ring a bell, right? I'm assuming these would align pretty well in your own organizations. 2 very important decisions early on proved to be game changer for our overall success. The first one was to set up this core team of 4 developers, right? And we were very choosy in how we did that. We picked these developers, one each from a different Scrum team spread across 3 regions. So once we trained these 4 developers, they went back to their Scrum teams and they pretty much trained their full Scrum teams. So this led to how we deployed the first app, then the next Scrum team picked up the second app, the next Scrum team picked up the third app, and a 4th is already underway. So hugely accelerated our development. The second choice was FastTrack, right? So I wanted to spend why FastTrack, right? Raagini has covered a lot around on that and what they have done. But from a consumer standpoint, FP&A was very new to cloud. We've not literally built anything in cloud. So this is our first experience in cloud. We wanted to be very secure. We deal with a lot of MNPI data, a lot of secure data. And we realized that cloud is a low secure environment. If you just wanted to onboard, it is a low secure environment. So it is very hard to test for security, to maintain the security profile. developers can easily make mistakes, right, if they're not very careful. So we worked with the FastTrack team, and I think the solution, we were impressed with the solution, right? As I said, the guardrails are tech risk approved, right? And they're not just one-time reviews, they can be executed at every pipeline. So providing us a more continuous, up-to-date profile. And I think it's a very totally differentiated solution that is available today. And as Raagini mentioned, FastTrack also gave us CDK accelerators, common patterns, that again helped with the productivity of our developers. So broadly, right, so we had several design sessions with AWS solution architects. We had some enhancements in FastTrack that we wanted. We deployed our first simple app. The architecture that you're seeing on the left is the representative architecture for FP&A Central that we went live with. Uses several AWS components, right, including DynamoDB, ECS Fargate, ALB, that we are all able to integrate and work around and get it deployed. We also went, because this was the first app in the firm, we went through rigorous tech risk reviews, we went through architecture bar raising, and then lastly, we learned everything to do with go live mechanisms. How do you create environments? How do you implement observability, logging? We use CloudWatch, another tool for PagerDuty, right? And lastly, we've now demised the on-prem app, and we're fully cloud native for FPA Central. Right. So hopefully, you can take this, and adapt to your organization if you're starting your cloud journey. So with that, I want to go to the next slide, which is, so what did we learn along the way? So we realized that cloud provides a much broader, more sophisticated set of options that can allow you to more closely match your compute consumption needs for your application. It is important that engineers understand the consequences of their design, right? The design choices has an impact both on the operational costs and how the maintenance, for example, if you choose serverless options, right, it's lower cost, easy to scale, low maintenance, right, low downtimes. We were almost 100% IAC. So what does that give you? You can innovate faster, right? You can have several choices that you can make, like especially when we are now thinking about our data engines, our calc engines, we can throw more compute to have faster turnaround time. But in cases where we can wait for longer, we can probably have a less compute profile. So, like IAC gives you a way to toggle all of these things. Also, to innovate faster for optimize for cloud, for cost. So if you build your architecture a certain way, you realize that you could have a different cost profile or you need a different compute profile, IAC would give you some of these benefits. It's BCP first, so we didn't even have to think a lot around BCP in on-prem. When we have this other strategies we had to establish. With cloud and FastTrack, we got this for free, right? Depending on how we configured our AZs, how we configured our regions. I think this was available to us fairly out of the box. Developer productivity increased, right? We're able to now manage our costs also on a daily basis. And lastly, while the ecosystem is maturing, FastTrack is also maturing. I think we're able to work with several engineering teams and get sort of our applications on board. So I hope this is benefit. Some of you can take these back and implement in your own organizations. With that, I want to leave you with the last slide. It's a plug for our Goldman Sachs engineering, right? So if you're interested, you can read some of Goldman Sachs engineering in our developer blog, where we talk a lot about cloud and related builds. In addition, if you want to learn more about how you can embed our developer solutions in your ecosystem or about our open source effort, you can please visit the site developer.gs.com. A lot of interesting articles and solutions available for you to look at. So yeah, so with that, I think we're end of our presentation and open for any questions.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you. Let's take a few more a couple of questions maybe from the audience, and then I'll ask the Goldman folks to turn over to chat and answer some of the questions that are going on over there. Any questions?
So since we are a highly regulated industry, chat is disabled on our WebEx, so we will need you to reach out outside. but we have put in our LinkedIn details out here, so feel free to reach out and we can connect after. But yeah, we'll take a few questions.
One question I did have is, are you saying FastTrack's a product you've open source now?
Let me take that one. So we haven't open sourced FastTrack. I think what Aditya was talking about in the previous slide, and let me just go back to that one, which is our developer blog. We do have an open source team, and we have open sourced a bunch of things in Goldman. So this was a generic Goldman wide view. But about FastTrack and specifically the guardrails, you might wonder why aren't the cloud service providers providing this option, right? Why do we have to write our own guardrails? So we started this project in partnership with AWS. FastTrack was conceived and the guardrails were initially built in partnership with AWS. So we have open sourced our guardrails back to AWS, and they are using them as part of CFN Guard. So that's something that is happening, but we don't think it's a competitive advantage for us to keep our guardrails to ourselves. We definitely want to help the community.
Yeah, and what, you mentioned Skybox. Was that's basically the integration from cloud to on-prem? Is that something you developed within AWS, or is it something that is more customized, on the GS network? Was it Skybox? I think you mentioned
Skypath. Skypath. It's an internal proxying solution. Yeah.
And is that just a connectivity solution, or does it have?
Yes, it's a connectivity solution, and there are two pieces that are useful to talk about with respect to Skypath. It essentially allows you to connect between two different trust zones. That's the goal of Skypath. Now, just talking a little bit about our cloud strategy, right? We wanted to provide a world-class developer experience, which is the goal of FastTrack, to take away the responsibility of creating or every developer being a security expert and moving that responsibility to the tools. That is the goal of FastTrack. But given that any firm that largely runs on-premise and is looking to start moving to the cloud incrementally, there will be a long lead time where you will have a lot of applications on-prem and some in the cloud, and they will need to connect with each other in this hybrid format, and that's what Skypath looks to solve for.
Yep.
Essentially, that we can create a way that all our cloud applications can connect back on-prem without having to each of them get one by one.
I guess my interest is, does Skypath also address the potential identity challenges you have with that integration? It's not just a networking issue.
It is a very, very good question. So we have something called Service Identity Framework that Skypath leverages, essentially requiring every endpoint to have that identity clearly defined, and only after that unique identity has been established, then they can onboard to Skypath. But if there is interest, we can talk to Fernando and line that up for the next quarter.
Definitely be interested. I think it's certainly for us, it's an underappreciated challenge.
And John, I would just want to add, it was a huge accelerator for us, right? And the whole service identity was very important. And I think Skypath enabled that. So as Raagini is saying, this is probably a session in itself. So
I'd love to have. I'd love to have a discussion with. But service identity is really like a pseudo cloud identity for an on-prem service. Is that what you're saying?
it acts like that. So you have to establish a service identity before it is enabled for sort of access for cloud. And Skypath and a framework called SIF enables us internally to do that. So think of it as steps to onboard onto Skypath before on-prem APIs are available.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love, if possible, I'd love to have that discussion with you.